What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're back checking out some more teams that have been announced for round 4 of the Rugby Championship. We've already done the preview video for the Wallabies versus the Springboks. If YouTube ever allows me to finally upload it, the video taking absolutely ages to be processed today, so unfortunately these videos probably coming out a bit later than I actually want to. But we're moving on to talk about the Pumas and the All Blacks. So let's start off by talking about the All Blacks first, because last week they suffered a loss to the Pumas against what a lot of people thought. That's not any disrespect to Argentina. That's genuinely what we saw when we went back over the results of the Super Brew. We found out something ridiculous, like 95% of people picked New Zealand to win that game. So a lot of people really didn't see that result going the way it did. Argentina be really impressed with that. Of course, we did do the match report for that video. You can go check that out. A lot of people really enjoyed the sort of breakdown around that I did on the channel. Going into this game then, you'd expect the way the All Blacks lost that game and the way that Argentina looked so good for big portions of that game, that what we'd really be expecting is a lot of shifts around in the New Zealand team and not so many in the Argentina team, and yet we've done almost the full switch of that. New Zealand are coming in with a completely unchanged starting 15. Really big call here, just to back the same team again, and hopefully the same mistakes aren't made the second time round. So we'll check out the team that's been named. So in the starting front row, we got Ethan de Groot, Taukei'o, and Lomax. Now, Taukei'o did actually manage to get over for a try last week, which was really nice to see. That driving maul was actually beginning to do a bit of work. Argentina did hold up quite well, but that one was just a bit of a run-over maul. Nice to see from them. In the lock department, Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett. Now, the line-out, not really a big issue for them last week. They did actually have, I would say 100% of their lineouts, or at halftime it was certainly 100% of the lineouts. They'd won all of theirs. They'd actually disrupted some of the Argentina lineouts as well, so they're getting on quite well. That 4-5 setup that I'm not really a fan of seeing them that way round, but, they're doing pretty well for Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett. In the back row, Shannon Frizzell, Sam Cane, and Ardie Savea. Now, Sam Cane came off last week, and a lot of people were quite surprised to see Sam Cane coming off. I really think they might want to shake up this back row a bit. I think that's maybe why they've got a couple of players on the bench they do this week. Ardie Savea still playing at a good high standard that we like to see from him. In the halfback partnership, Aaron Smith and Richie Mwanga retain that 9-10 combo. Kicking last week, Richie Mwanga missed a kick that didn't feel like terrible, and then scored this amazing kick right from the touchline. So the kicking, not necessarily the highest percentage, but he's still doing pretty well. Just needs more options in terms of the running capabilities, I think, for him, because a lot of these players very static when they're getting going. You just want to see New Zealand have free flow rugby. It was a very stop-start last week, so hard for them to get going. In the centre partnership, David Havili and Rico Ioane going to be returning in that centre position. And then finally the back three, Caleb Clark, Will Jordan, and Geordie Barrett. Now, Caleb Clark got himself a try as well last week on a really nice run. Will Jordan's been quiet. Anyone else thinking this? Will Jordan last week for me was being used like a flanker in the way he was just in every ruck, supporting in every ruck. I don't know why they're not giving him the ball quickly enough. They're not getting him in any sort of space. Every time he seems to have the ball, it seems to be literally when he's on the far touchline with two people breathing down his neck, not giving him the room to work with at all. You see Will Jordan, if you give him an inch, he'll just make good ground, but you've got to give him something. I think this is still probably the right way to go, to have them both on. Caleb Clark's not been used the way I expected him to in terms of just being like an extra forward, because he's a big guy, he gets involved. We haven't really seen him on the crash ball or doing the pick and drives that I've seen him do in club level before. But in terms of that running speed, certainly got very good. So overall, same starting 15. This is a really big call, because obviously a couple of things went wrong for them last week. We saw Argentina have immense defence last week, absolutely throwing themselves on the line. Really nice to see. So no switch-ups means we've got to expect a big game plan. Now, this is where a couple of people have been blaming the coach for, games going wrong for New Zealand recently. This is one of the games where if you don't change any of the starting team and you change the game plan and the game plan goes wrong again, you lose again, that's where coaches' heads begin to get on the block. If you can swap people out and improve your game plan, then, you can begin to blame the players, but this could be a big risk on a coaching department. In terms of the subs, then, we have Dane Cole's going to be the first change coming in now on that replacement hooker, trying a bit of a different dynamic maybe to that team. I think Taukei'o's playing well. I don't imagine we'll see Dane Cole's go on super early in this in that second half. George Bower and Fletcher Newell are going to be retaining their spots. Brody Retallick and Dalton Papali'i. I feel like I haven't said Papali'i for a long time. Brody Retallick's come back, I believe, off a long-term injury, which I don't even really remember him picking up. I don't think the line-out situation was where they were particularly going in bad situations. Maybe they're thinking more Brody Retallick will come on in like a lock department, and they might bring Scott Barrett back into that number 6 shirt. We've seen that before. And then Dalton Papali'i could come on at 7. Maybe that's the way they're going to switch up again, going for this 5-3 split. Yeah, I don't know. Last week's game was a bit tricky to sort of get to grips with what was going wrong. It was so stop-start. I don't really think having more forwards or having more backs, I don't think it would have made a big deal either way. They just couldn't get everything they wanted together. They just weren't synergizing very well. So I think this is probably the good players. I don't see them taking Ardi Salvaire off anytime soon. So I think that's probably a decent setup for them there. And then the replacement backs, Finlay Christie, Bowden Barrett comes back into the side, and Quinn Tupaya, again, remaining on that bench. Now, I feel really bad for... who was the replacement fly-off last week? Was it Profiter? I think his name's pronounced. We literally saw him for 2 minutes in a game where they were desperately in trouble, making his debut, and then he's no longer in this team. So that was a shame for him. I would have liked to have seen him have some actual game time and get on, or maybe even started this game and have Bowden on the bench, or have Richie Mwanga on the bench. You know, that might have been nice. I'm not sure if there was any news. Maybe there was something that I've completely missed about why he's not in this team. But I would have liked to see him got a bit more game time. But yeah, New Zealand pretty much go in. Let's do it again and hope for a different result. They do say Madness is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But maybe they've got a new game plan that's going to be way better against this Argentina team, who we need to move on to talk about. We're really happy with their performance last week. So many of the penalties coming in from Boffelli's boot really helped them get that scoreboard out. If it wasn't for Boffelli just kicking over and over and over again, a really high percentage kicking. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is if New Zealand don't give away as many penalties and don't allow Boffelli to just sort of kick them into the lead. Are they going to struggle to gain that many points through just scoring tries or going for the driving maul? So in terms of their team that's been announced, there is actually a couple of switches for Argentina this week. So Gallo, Montoya, and Sclavi. I still don't quite know this guy's pronunciation. Sclavi or Sclavi? I've heard two different commentators pronounce it differently. Hopefully someone can enlighten me a little bit on that. Change coming in here. Guido Petty coming in the lock department alongside with Lavanini. Now, Alemano, I think, has been playing really well. I'm not sure why this is. I know Guido Petty's got a high cap rate. I know he's a well-known player in this Argentina team. But if you're playing well, I don't know. Maybe Argentina felt that the line-out wasn't going their way. They lost 2 in that first half. Maybe they're thinking bring him on a little bit later, maybe just to try and reinforce the line-out in the first half, and then you bring Alemano on later on, maybe for some actual gameplay in terms of like your tackling or running with the ball in hand. Maybe that's what they're hoping to move towards, just try and keep the New Zealand line-out in check, especially people like Brody Retallick coming on later. You're going to want to try and reinforce that line-out later on. On to the back row then, where we've got one switch up as well. Grondona coming in on the number 6 shirt, rather than Gonzalez, who did get a try last week. I would have kept him on. I thought he was having a good game. But yeah, Grondona coming in. Kramer retains that 7 shirt, and Pablo Matera in the number 8 shirt. Man, that guy is loving life. Moved over to New Zealand, learned how they play, and now he's just teaching it back to them. Really, really impressed with his performance last week. Nice to see from him. In the halfback partnership, Thomas Cubelli comes in over Bertrano. Again, I thought Bertrano played well. I probably would have left him on at the start, and Cubelli's there to seal out the game. I like the way Bertrano plays in this Argentina team. I feel like he has so much more energy for going forwards and just taking it on himself. He'll carry the ball in. He picks some really nice passes of people on really nice lines. I feel like Cubelli's much more just the standard distributor, whereas Bertrano feels like he has more energy to get going forwards. I would maybe like to have seen Bertrano starting again and try and put New Zealand on that back foot. Carreras still playing well, though. It's nice to see him still retaining that fly half shirt. In the centre partnership, Orlando and Moroni are going to be the choices for this week. They like mixing up these centres. In fact, they like mixing up the backs quite a lot, including this back 3. Cordero comes in over Lucio Cinti, who again I thought played well. I think there's some big switches. They're obviously trying to get these players game time in playing higher end teams. Not bad as we move towards the World Cup. You want to have a deep squad, but in terms of just winning this game, there's a lot of switches of players I think are playing well that I maybe wouldn't have done. We still have Boffelli on the right wing. I've no doubt going to be still kicking as much as he can, and then finally Malia in that fullback shirt. So a couple of switches round. This isn't necessarily going to be a bad thing, but the thing I would think most is you'd want team synergy. I'd want to be keeping as many people in that team that won against New Zealand last week in again this week, just to try and reinforce, double down, get another wing, high confidence before they go off to play South Africa. But what do I know? That's why Checker is the coach, and I'm not. In terms of the replacements then, we have Santiago Sochino, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Vivas, and then Bello. Now, I did feel like the forwards were more dominated by New Zealand last week, so hopefully having some of these names that I'm less familiar with won't make too much of an impact on this Argentina team. Alemano and Gonzalez are going to be the replacement forwards, as we've already sort of mentioned about the interswitch there, that I probably would have had both of them starting. Along with Bertrand, I probably would have also had him on. Now, 22, Erda Pilieta. Maybe. Hopefully I'm getting that sort of correct in terms of pronunciation. Do not know anything about this lad. Never heard his name before. May have played games in the past. I don't know a lot about him. Really looking forward. I'll keep a special eye out for him to try and have a bit more information as we move forward through this tournament. And then finally in that 23 shirt, Lucio Cinti going to be coming on. So I think this backline, I don't think this bench is as good as the New Zealand bench to me personally. I still think there's some good players in there. I don't think it's quite the full depth as the New Zealand bench, but you know, if they can just keep that pressure on, if they can get a bit of a lead going, if Boffelli can kick them in the lead, they can launch some of the backs. I would really, again, I'd like to see some of these backs go on the attacking play like we got to see against the Wallabies and like we sort of saw for parts of the game against New Zealand. Some of these backs, when they just unload, they just make huge ground, just making the most of these mistakes coming from New Zealand. But in terms of a score prediction going into this game, what do we think? Well, to me, my brain takes over a little bit more rather than like gut feelings. I tend to go more with like what I actually just believe now. I think New Zealand will know from the backlash of losing that game last week, they need to step this up. I imagine the coaching staff have been absolutely gunning in things like your handling, your knock-ons, your penalties. Surely you'd believe they've been knocking that down a little bit this week and just trying to organise that team. I think playing the same team again it's doubling down, believing that this team has the capabilities to go on and win this game. So I'm actually going to go for New Zealand here in terms of my prediction because I feel like they'll have a bit of a point to prove to themselves going into this one. So I'm going to say New Zealand to win, probably not as much as I predicted last week because I was really impressed by Argentina. So I'm going to say New Zealand to win. I'm going to say New Zealand to win by 8, actually. That's going to be my final prediction. But of course, guys, what do I know about rugby? So make sure you guys do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game, your thoughts on the team. What do you think the score prediction will be? I always enjoy having a bit of a read through them. If you enjoyed this one today, guys, remember to leave it a like. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel. We're slowly getting towards that 2,000 subscribers. It'd be really nice to get there by the end of the Rugby Championship. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.